Kona kei o pua I kalai, o pua hina no I tamari e. Hi orona I te Keauhou, ke na ula na kamari. Ke gauhi ana I te kukunala, kula kori ka ili kai, pume hana wale hoi e. Aloha na kia o oru, he ina ia mehi ana ka puana, no liho liho no la hei noa, hei noa no liho liho. It was in ways like that that I understand the kupuna, the po'ekahiko, the people of old, greeted their chiefs and the chiefs of the chiefs, the land itself. These lands of Kahalu'u and Keauhou, Keauhou iki, Keauhou nui, are aina leali'i, lands which adorned the chiefs of old, famous lands in all of Kona, perhaps even the greatest complex of traditional sites in this entire district for its number of heiau and for the families of Hawaii's history that are associated with it, from Maikawa Mamua, from the very earliest of time up to this present day. And so in ways like that chant that was used as a name song for Liho Liho, Kamehameha II, it shares with us some very important thoughts of Kona. And one of the wonderful stories of the people who lived along this coast between Kahalu'u, Keauhou, down into Kailua, is the association of the setting sun. In the old days, the kupuna said that the children would watch the sun as it was just setting. In fact, there's a beautiful riddle. Ma luna kawai, ma lalo kawai, e no nae, aole pului kawai. It is above the water and below the water, yet not moistened by it. Ah, hea ha'ia, ah, ea kapuana. Here's the answer. Kala, the sun. Because each day it arose once again, never being moistened or put out. Its fire always burning. And so the children of Kona, famous, they, they would call just as the sun was just dropping below the water's edge to see who could chant the longest, to draw the last ray of the sun to them. For me, the rays of the sun are mine. Well, this chant describes that even a little further when it says, while the land is moistened by the falling drops of the Keauhou, this light dew that was waterborne, windborne, that gave life to the people of this land here, it was also the setting sun that the children called out to, trying to retain it, to keep it from setting, capturing the last rays of the sun. But this is the land where the sun indeed sets below the surface of the water. And so this chant and the sayings are a part of the expression of the spirit of the people of old. And aloha was that way of life, yeah? You malama pono ika aina, care righteously for the land, and that includes everything. The ocean, the deepest kaipo poluhua kane, the deep, dark ocean of Kane, and everything up to the pico of Huala'alai at Hainoa, which is above us here. You care righteously for all these things, and the environment, will care for you as well. And this isn't a make-up, a fairy tale kind. It was a way of life. You learned quickly at Kahalu'u, which is why the konohiki, the managers of the land, the ali'i, knew every nuance, the breezes, the rains, the cycles of the ocean, the cycles of the fish. Certain time were kapu, Other times not. When one was kapu, another was available though. And these are important values for us to remember. And if we could for a moment go also just into the neighboring land of Keauhou, just a little more than half a mile above us is a place called Pu'u'okaloa, the hill of Kaloa. Kaloa was one of the sons of Umi Aliloa, whose heiau is just mauka of us on the end of Makole'a Road, Pa'o'umi, the enclosure of Umi. Well, Kaloa was one of those chiefs who had a mixed reputation. But there's an interesting saying, again, talking about the relation of people with the land about them, working, like Kukukino Kahananui, yeah? Hana ino kalima ai ino no kawaha. This is his famous saying from his tutu, when the hands do dirty work, the mouth eats dirty food. And so the kupuna taught in riddles and in sayings like this. Well, one of their riddles was, ua ka ua ipu o ka loa, ihea oi. Ikona ne, mawaho oi, palawa lelo oi. The saying was, the rains fell at Pu'uokaloa because you see, they knew, as we said, the nuances of the seasons, when certain things occurred. So when the rains came off of Huala'alai and touched Pu'uokaloa, it was time for you to go out and plant your sweet potatoes. But if you were moloa, lazy, and you missed this opportunity, you said, nakame e, na no ikanu, so-and-so's gonna plant, no need worry. So they would ask you when you came to their house, the rains fell at Pu'uokaloa, and where were you? If the reply was kona, they would say, you stay outside, you one lazy bugger. Moloa, palawa lelo oi, waste time. But if they asked you this saying, and you said, ihilo, ika'u, ikohala, paha, maybe at hilo, ka'u, kohala, maloko oi, hele mai oi e ai. They would say, you come on inside, you eat. Because in their mind, they knew that you hadn't been moloa. You had been away on some errand or some other business, and so they invited you to come in and partake of the benefit of the foods that were available. Of course, these heiau and these sites throughout here are all tied with developing sustenance of the land, whether it be the ocean, or the actual crops of the land, or the mana, the prayers that inspired abundance. So each of the heiau of Kahalu'u, of Keauhou, for the most part are tied with this, whether it was of a almost luakini class, which was the strictest, in which at times human sacrifice were required. Those were still to produce a wealth, richness of the land and the ocean. So as we sit here, right now as an example, we're sitting in a replica of the old house of King David Kalakaua. Kahalu'u, his genealogy ties him to this land. This house sits on the edge of a spring called Po'o Hawaii. The land here is tied back by generations to various chiefly families of the Kona district. One of the prominent families was Isa'aka Lanai. Isa'aka Lanai was a mid-level chief, Kaukauali'i, who was a steward of the higher chiefs above him. He was a steward to Kuakini, Ka'ahumanu's brother. It is said that in this very spot, the bones of Kuakini were actually prepared in the traditional style for burial, and that it was Isa'aka Lanai who prepared, by the family stories, who prepared those bones of Kuakini for burial. Another one of the prominent families here, besides Isa'aka Lanai, is a family that now goes by the name Nahale. Yeah? There was a longer name, Nahale Pa'ilau Niu, the houses made or thatched by coconut fronds, coconut leaves. And reportedly, their longer name was cut down to Nahale. And it was because of the thatched house that sat on this property also during the lifetime of Kuakini. In today's history, though Kupuna has left us now, Kupuna Haumea Macumber Smith, she was born in 1913, and she was an heir of this land from her Kupuna Isa'akalanai. They lived here and in the land just in front of Kapua Noni Heiau. In talking story with Kupuna like her, with Mitchell Fujisaka, with Alan Wall, with Vala Ko, with members of the Kahalu'u family, you get, and Alapa'i folks, with Keauhou Alapa'i and his kahu, who was Naluahine Kaopua, they handed down stories that were a part of the life of this place. They gave us the names of nearly every spot along this land and how the families lived. But let's come up to Kupuna Haumea Smith for a moment as an example. In talking story with her, she told us a personal family story about her own family's tie to Ha'apaiali'i Heiau, which is a prominent heiau associated with the Kamehameha lineages and on back through the generations. One of her sisters, the family story is that when a boy, because of their chiefly lineage, when a boy was born, whether the drums were still visible or not at Ha'apaiali'i, that the ringing of the drums, of the sacred drums of Ha'apaiali'i, would be heard announcing that a new boy in that lineage had been born. There was something interesting that happened, though, about 1914. A girl child was born to that family, face down. And the beating of the drums was heard resonating from Ha'apaiali'i Heiau. But when they turned the baby upside or over, right side up, they found, Hanau Hewahine. It was a girl, not a boy. Immediately the pahu stopped ringing. Now this is 1914. This kind of mana, the Kupuna spoke about that, deep connection. And so this baby's name was Kapa'ihi Akea, the resonating drums, the sacred resonating drums heard afar. Huli kapahu, the drums are turned over. He hanau wahine. It is a girl that was born. And so that name is handed down through the generations, describing this. And so that's, I think, one of the critical things when we look at landscapes today. It's easy for science and engineers to look at it very cold, and what they see are facts, whether they're accurate or not, by the way, too. This is very important. Whether these facts are accurate based on long-term observations or just a simple assessment of what you see over the last few days or even years, just few years. The Kupuna say, you look at the land, you live on the land, but not only is it just stones, bones, fish, inanimate objects, everything is alive. And that's why it's so important to involve Kama'aina, native people of the land, people who have generations of residency. And you can't sit down in a formal meeting and just expect them to talk everything forward. It takes building relationships because these people are of the land. It's like that word kulaivi. When we sing Hawaii Aloha? Kulaivi, the plains in which the bones are buried. Whose bones are those? Those are the bones of your ancestors. Those are what connect you to the past. Those are what give life to the land, give life to the present generation, and if we respect it, give life to the future. And now, it doesn't matter if you Hawaiian or any other nationality, because our responsibility once we step on this land is to respect, to honor, to know the history. So there are issues that arise at Kahalu'u. As an example, we have the beautiful Heiau Ku'e Manu on the sort of the north side of the bay, and the beautiful little spring of Waiku'i. Yes? At Ku'e Manu, the story of old was that it was a heiau for the surfers. Yeah? When they were ready to go out, he'e nalu. And if there were no waves, they would actually go to the heiau, ask the priest to offer prayers. He would gather up the vines of the pohuehue, which I don't even know if they grow on Kahalu'u anymore, the native beach morning glory. And it's not endangered, but it's a beautiful plant that belongs on this coast. They would gather the pohuehue, and by the way, it is also a good natural stabilizer. And there's a difference, right, between hardening a coastline and natural, so that it breathes, so that there's life. So the pohuehue would be gathered by the priest, and he would call, "E ala e na nalu, nalu mai kahiki, arise waves, waves from kahiki." And he would strike the water with the pohuehue, chanting to create the waves for the surf. So Ku'e Manu is one of those places that was used to ho'ala, to awaken the waves. Now the kupuna have a very interesting story too, though. You ever see kohola out here, yeah? And you imagine the whales, and on a calm day, you see the whales off in the distance. And I have to tell you, I only learned this story a short while ago from one of our kupuna on Lanai. Her interpretation, what her tutu said, tutu mahina kauloa ko opuiki, smo'opuna le kanipai, who is now 92 years old, as a child, learned from her kupuna that when you see kohola out there and then you see them slapping their tails on the ocean on a calm day, they're doing just what the kupuna did, slap the water with the pohuehue to awaken the waves, because the whales would rather have an animated sea rather than, kaionea, just a blank paia, blank soft sea. So to me, I love these connections, nature to the stories of people. So here you are, you have Ku'e Manu. Then we come to the beautiful little spring of Waikua'ala. This is a spring of life. Everywhere where there was water, water was the essence of life. Waioke'ola, water that gives life. Of course, Mauka of us, of Waikua'ala, the old church Heilani, is the site of Ohi'amukumuku, the heiau. This was Luakini class. This was a heiau of sacrifice. In fact, the chant earlier for Liholiho, Liholiho was the last chief of the lineage to reawaken that heiau upon his father's return to Kona about 1811. Ohi'amukumuku is a powerful place. The cave that enters below there that goes up to the mountain is important as well. Then you come down further, as we said, you have Po'o Hawaii. We go out to the point, Kapuanoni, a heiau associated with Ho'oulu'i'a, the abundance of the sea, causing increase, Ho'oulu, increase of the sea. You have further down the line, Kaua Ko'e Ko'e and Kamau'ai, these heiau where prayers would be offered so that the